Where does that love and that passion for recruiting come from? Because I feel like following you, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but to cover recruiting the way you cover it in depth, I mean, you have to truly love the process of recruiting. And I'll be totally honest with you, Phil, and I feel like it's blasphemy for someone that does what I do to say this, but I've told my audience this many, many times. Like, I'm not someone that it doesn't get my rocks off to know how a 16-year-old felt about a visit to our school. Like, it just, you know what I'm saying? It's never, I love recruiting to a degree, but especially in today's day and age where guys are releasing top 15 lists and they're releasing offer lists. I mean, you know, it's recruiting has become such it's just so all over the place. But for you specifically, what makes recruiting so enjoyable to you? What do you love so much about it that makes it where you can cover it to the level in which you guys do?
Well, I can promise you that I did not grow up dreaming to be a guy that covered recruiting. Okay. I mean, that never entered my mind, never even knew the first thing about it, was never exposed to it. First exposed to it when I was with Bill Wagee, and there was a guy out of Detroit who was an engineer with Ford Motor Company. And once a year in Sports Illustrated, in the scorecard section, once a year, he would publish a top 20 recruiting class list. And he would just list the colleges. Here are your top 20 football recruiting classes for this year. He was the only one that did anything with it. And in fact, Bill would get him on the show to talk about it. And so that's where I first kind of got a glimpse of this thing. And then Bill sort of dabbled in it a little bit and got me dabbling in it a little bit, calling some players here and there for his show. So eventually, when I moved to Greenville and started doing sports up there, I started making recruiting calls on players and started reporting this information. All of a sudden, people would start contacting me about players or asking me about this guy, that guy. And I thought to myself, I mean, people know who you are now. You know, I had no real identity in the sports business up to that point. I was just really a sports reporter, no major identity, not a personality or anything like that. All of a sudden, people are noticing who I am and what my name is. And so I thought to myself, you know, this could be your little niche. This could be a little niche. Nobody was really doing it locally or not that much nationally. A guy named Alan Wallace had a publication in California named Super Prep. And there were publications like that starting to spring up. So when I came to the network, Don had noticed what I was doing in recruiting, and they gave me a full budget, an open budget to say, and just, they said, you know, whatever you need to do to cover recruiting, you do it. Phone calls, you know, this was back when you had phone bills with long distance phone calls, and I could run up a phone bill. We're talking hundreds of dollars because you make a long distance phone call, you know, remember how it was back then. I guess maybe you don't know how it was back then, but they gave me a blank check really to do what I needed to do to cover recruiting. And I was the only one really doing it to that extent. And then newspapers asked me to cover for them to help out. And I did that. And then newspapers themselves, they saw the value in covering recruiting, and they had their own reporters start to cover recruiting. You know, the State, the Greenville News, they used to spend a lot of time doing that. But, you know, because there was no internet and there was no instant news release, you know, if I got information on a kid committing like at, you know, 2 p.m, I could hold it till 6 o'clock that night. In fact, I could tease in the show, make people wait. Hey, 7:05, we'll have news, big recruiting news. You can't do that now. I mean, it's an instant rush. So that's kind of how it got started. And I started a publication called the Recruiting News back in the 80s, a print publication. And then, of course, gravitated to the website side of things as that developed. And it's really, I mean, to me, recruiting is like breathing. It's just part of what I do every day. I mean, I enjoy it. I still enjoy talking to the kids. It's changed. It's changed so much because kids today, in a lot of ways, you know, they're wiser, they're more worldly, they're more into themselves. They don't really, used to be, you call a kid, they really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. They appreciate the exposure. Now kids are exposed so early and they have so much of it. They don't need people like me to call them and give them exposure. They've got their own Twitter and they got everything else. So it's a little bit more difficult today to get the elite players to talk to you. The ones I really appreciate are the kind of like this basketball player that South Carolina just got committed from Denmark Older. Nobody had ever heard of him. I had never really heard of him until he committed. But he was appreciative of the phone call, the conversation, the interview. And that's, I still enjoy when I connect with a player like that. It's still fun to see commitments come out. I mean, it used to be, like you mentioned, you don't get your rocks off on breaking commitments or that kind of information. Yeah, it used to be really quite the deal to break a commitment. But now, a website breaks a commitment and 30 seconds later, it's all over Twitter and everybody's got it. So you just don't have that same sort of sensation, I guess you would say, that you had back when it was an exclusive and you were the only one that had it and you were the only one putting it out and everybody knew where it was coming from. Now people within 3 or 4 minutes, they can't remember what site they got the information from because it's out there so quick.
Right.
Just like today, Shane Beamer put out a commitment alert and everybody was working to try to find out who it is. And the best I could come up with is that the kid wants to wait until July 5th to announce. And so he's not putting out anything and everybody sort of who would know sort of tighten the hatches on that story. So, you're going to have to wait until July 5th for the young man to put it out. I mean, I kind of have an idea who it is, but out of respect to him, you don't want to, if the kid wants to have a day, you let him have a day. I don't want to, do that. So, but anyway, it's just recruiting's just become part of my everyday function, something that I've done for over 30 years, and I'll probably keep doing it till I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I definitely, with recruiting, listen, it's the lifeblood of college football. You have to do it to win and be successful. I don't care who your coach is. You got to have the Jimmies and Joes versus the X's and O's. I guess for me, probably from the fan side of things, it's like it's such a kids can change their minds so quick, and man, it's such a bummer when you get like the Stockton thing. I mean, it's such a bummer to get all hype and invested in the guy, and then boom, they're gone. And I mean, that was for obvious reasons, but it's like, man. So I'm one of those. I get excited when guys commit, but and again, it's a different kind of, I think, perspective for you because it's for business and you're covering everybody. I'm thinking specifically from the South Carolina side of things. I tell people, hey, let's put pen to paper. Let's get on campus, let the pads pop, and let's let all that talk and all that hype come to fruition. And then we get it. Either way, whatever.
Well, the hype and the talk. I mean, listen, that's what keeps our shows going.
You're right.
In the Southeast, and I always do a recruiting report every night on the show. We don't get the volume of calls on recruiting like we used to, because so much of the information's on the internet. And we'll get some occasional call here or there, but not like we used to. I used to do, I think you might have mentioned it, a Sunday night recruiting show that was 2 hours of nothing but recruiting. And it's because nobody else had it, Now there's no need to do that. The information would be stale by the time we put it out there. So, but you mentioned the Gunnar Stockton. And you're right. I mean, this is how colleges put their rosters together. It's the process. And you get a guy like Gunnar Stockton committed to you. I mean, there's reason to be excited because he's supposed to be that extra special, that next level quarterback.
And the guy you build your class around. The guy you build your class around.
And in this age, the way football is being played, you're not going to win big if you don't have a quarterback.
Right.
And that guy looked, really, really good. He's going to look really good at Georgia. And that's a big loss for South Carolina. Now, the hope is that somebody they've got now, or maybe somebody coming in, is going to be that quarterback. Time will tell. But by all accounts, this guy was special. Just like a Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson, how they were at Clemson. You've got that generational type quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. I will say, even with me, I've gotten much more into recruiting and been excited for it with Shane Beamer. It's hard not to be, optimistic and positive and see everything, all the momentum on the recruiting trail and these official visits, especially with on-campus visits coming back.